A weak puppy dragged itself to a stranger's doorstep. What the security camera captured left everyone in tears. The snow-covered streets were eerily silent, except for the occasional howling wind that swept through the empty city roads. Inside a sleek, black luxury car, Victor Hale gripped the steering wheel with frustration. The flashing lights of skyscrapers reflected in his cold, calculating eyes, but tonight, even the sight of his empire failed to bring him satisfaction. Victor was a self-made millionaire, but not the kind people admired. His wealth wasn't built on hard work and kindness. It was ruthlessness that got him to the top. He believed money made him untouchable, a king in a world where emotions were for the weak. Earlier that evening, a major business deal collapsed, wiping out millions from his fortune. Enraged, he sped through the streets, his mind clouded with anger. He needed an outlet for his frustration. And unfortunately, fate had placed a helpless soul in his path. As Victor turned onto a deserted road leading out of the city, his car's headlights caught something small on the icy sidewalk. A tiny, trembling puppy, barely a few months old, was curled up beside an overflowing dumpster. The puppy's ribs were visible beneath its thin coat. Its fur was matted with ice, and its small body shivered violently against the cold. The poor creature lifted its head weakly, its cloudy eyes locking onto the approaching car. There was no strength left in its frail limbs, no hope of escaping the bitter winter. Victor slammed his foot on the brakes. A smirk played at the corners of his lips. "Pathetic," he muttered, shaking his head. Instead of ignoring the puppy and driving away like any other heartless person might have, Victor did something far worse. He stepped out of his car, the expensive leather of his shoes crunching against the ice. The puppy whimpered softly, almost as if begging for warmth, for mercy. But mercy was something Victor never gave. He bent down, grabbed the weak creature by the scruff of its neck, and lifted it into the air like a piece of trash. The puppy didn't struggle, it was too weak to fight back. It simply stared at him, its eyes reflecting pure, innocent trust. And then, without hesitation, Victor hurled the puppy into the snow-covered ditch beside the road. The tiny body hit the frozen ground with a dull thud. The cold bit into its skin like 1,000 knives. The little creature let out a heartbreaking whimper, but Victor didn't even turn back. Instead, he dusted his hands off, climbed back into his heated luxury car, and sped away, leaving the weak puppy to its fate in the deadly winter night. But what Victor didn't know was that this cruel act would come back to haunt him in ways he never imagined. Because this was not just an abandoned animal. This was karma's messenger. And the night was far from over. The night was merciless. The sky, once filled with twinkling stars, was now hidden behind heavy, gray clouds. The wind howled through the empty streets, carrying sharp ice particles that stung against anything in their path. And there, in the middle of it all, a tiny, helpless puppy lay trembling in the snow. Its small body shuddered violently, its fur already stiff with ice. The freezing air pierced through its skin, seeping deep into its fragile bones. It tried to move, but its limbs felt heavy, as if the cold itself was holding it down, refusing to let go. Not long ago, it had felt warmth. It had been inside a car, curled up on the soft seat, its heart still trusting. But that warmth had been a lie. It hadn't realized that the hands that once held it would soon betray it in the worst way possible. The moment was still fresh in its mind. The car had stopped. The door had opened. And then, without warning, strong hands had grabbed it and tossed it into the freezing snow. The puppy had barely understood what was happening when the car door slammed shut. It had scrambled to its tiny feet, trying to follow, but before it could even take a step, the vehicle had sped off, leaving it alone in the deadly cold. It had stood there for a moment, watching the red taillights disappear into the distance, waiting for them to come back. But no one did. The puppy had let out a soft whimper, a tiny cry for help. But the wind had swallowed its voice, carrying it far away into the empty night. Now, as it lay in the snow, its breathing slow and weak, the truth began to settle in. No one was coming. The cold was everywhere, wrapping around the puppy like an icy grip, pulling it deeper into darkness. Its eyelids grew heavy, its heartbeat slowing. It didn't know what was happening. It just knew it was getting harder to stay awake. The snow piled up around its tiny body, as if the earth itself was trying to bury it. Was this the end? Then, somewhere inside its tiny, fragile heart, a spark of survival flickered. It wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. With whatever strength it had left, the puppy lifted its head. The world was blurry. The wind roared in its ears, and the darkness around it felt endless. But deep within that frozen emptiness, it spotted something. A faint light, glowing softly in the distance. A house. Warmth. Safety. It had no idea if someone would help it, but it had to try. If it stayed here, it would die. With a weak, desperate whimper, the puppy tried to stand. Its front paws wobbled. Its tiny legs, frozen stiff, struggled to support its fragile body. But the cold had drained all of its strength. The moment it tried to take a step, its paws slipped against the icy ground, and it collapsed back into the snow. Pain shot through its tiny body, but it didn't cry. Instead, it did the only thing it could. It dragged itself forward, inch by inch. Every movement felt impossible. The snow clung to its fur, making it even harder to move. The ice cut into its soft paws, leaving tiny trails of blood behind. But the puppy didn't stop. The cold tried to pull it down. The wind tried to push it back. But something deep inside the puppy refused to give in. It crawled. It struggled. It fought. Its tiny stomach growled in pain. His body trembled violently. Each breath it took felt heavier than the last. But still, it moved forward. The house was getting closer now. The warm light from the window glowed softly, almost like a beacon calling it home. The thought of warmth, of safety, pushed the puppy forward. But the journey was not over. Just as it reached the driveway, the wind picked up again, stronger this time. A powerful gust sent a thick wave of snow crashing into the puppy's tiny body, burying it completely under a frozen blanket. Silence. For a moment, everything was still. The world had swallowed the puppy whole. Then movement. A small paw emerged from the snow. A tiny, trembling body forced its way out. The puppy gasped for air, shivering violently, but it didn't stop. Kept crawling, kept pushing forward. And then, finally, it reached the doorstep. With its last ounce of strength, the puppy lifted a trembling paw and tapped against the door. Once, twice. A soft, weak sound, almost too quiet to hear. Then its tiny body collapsed. The snow began to cover it again, the cold creeping in. The puppy's breathing slowed. His heartbeat weakened. Everything was fading. But what the security camera recorded next left the entire world in tears. The night was silent, except for the sound of the wind whistling through the empty streets. Inside the warm house, everything was still. The fireplace crackled softly, casting a golden glow across the cozy living room. It was the kind of night meant for comfort, a night where the cold was nothing more than a distant thought, locked outside beyond the sturdy walls. But then a sound, soft, barely audible. At first, it seemed like the wind playing tricks, a faint rustling against the door. But there it was again, a weak, trembling scratch. It was so faint, so desperate, that it almost went unnoticed. But fate had other plans. Inside, a woman stirred from her seat. Something about the sound, about the fragility of it, sent a chill down her spine. It wasn't the sound of branches scraping or the shifting of ice. It was something alive, curious. She set down her book and rose from her chair. As she made her way toward the front door, a strange feeling settled in her chest, a feeling she couldn't quite explain. When she reached the door, she hesitated. Her fingers hovered over the handle, her breath catching in her throat. The scratching had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. Then, just as she was about to turn away, a low, pained whimper. Her heart lurched. Something was out there, and whatever it was suffering. Before opening the door, the woman reached for her phone, pulling up the live feed from her security camera. The porch light flickered on, casting a dim glow over the doorstep. And then her heart stopped. Right there, lying motionless in the snow, was a tiny puppy. His fur was soaked, matted with ice. Its frail body barely moved, its breathing almost non-existent. The snow had already begun to pile up around it, as if the night itself was trying to erase its existence. For a second, she couldn't move. The sight of it, the sheer helplessness, the heartbreaking loneliness, paralyzed her. Then her eyes caught something else, something even more disturbing. She rewound the footage, her hands shaking. And there it was, the moment that shattered her heart. The camera had captured everything. A luxury car had pulled up to the edge of her driveway earlier that night. The headlights had cut through the darkness like sharp knives. The door had opened and a figure, a man in an expensive suit, had stepped out. In his hands he held something small. The puppy. The woman's stomach twisted as she watched the footage unfold. The man didn't hesitate. With a single, careless motion, he threw the puppy into the snow. No second thought. No remorse. The puppy had landed with a soft, almost inaudible thud, its tiny body struggling to move. The man had glanced down at it once, just once, before turning away and getting back into his heated car. Then, without a moment's hesitation, he had driven off, leaving the puppy to die. The woman felt a lump rise in her throat. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a lost puppy looking for a home. This was cruelty. This was betrayal. And now, the tiny creature had used every last ounce of its strength to drag itself to her doorstep, as if somehow knowing this was its only chance at survival. Tears burned in her eyes. She didn't wait another second. Her hands flew to the lock, and in one swift motion, she threw open the door. The icy wind rushed inside, but she didn't care, because there, in the middle of the frozen night, a miracle was waiting, and she wasn't going to turn it away. The woman who had rescued the puppy couldn't shake off the disturbing scene she had witnessed. Every time she played back the security camera footage, her heart ached a little more. The tiny, weak puppy, barely able to move, dragging its frozen body through the thick snow, trying desperately to reach the warmth of her doorstep. Then, a moment that sent chills down her spine. The footage revealed a luxury black car pulling up to the side of the road. The windows were tinted, hiding the identity of the driver. Then, without any hesitation, the door swung open, and a man shoved the helpless puppy out into the freezing night. No second thoughts, no remorse. The tiny animal landed in the snow with a soft thud, letting out a weak, pained yelp. The driver slammed the door shut and sped off into the darkness, leaving the innocent creature to fend for itself in the brutal storm. Tears welled in the woman's eyes as she uploaded the video to social media. She added a caption that struck a nerve with thousands of people. Broken heart, this innocent puppy was abandoned in the snow like trash. Let's find the person responsible and bring them to justice. At first, a handful of people reacted with outrage, commenting messages of support. But within hours, something unimaginable happened. The video went viral. The numbers skyrocketed. Snowflake 100K views, then 500K, then 5 million. Snowflake, news outlets picked up the story. Snowflake, celebrities and influencers shared the post, demanding justice. Snowflake, animal rights organizations launched investigations. And then the internet did what it does best. Someone recognized the car. Police car light. I work at a luxury car dealership, and I know this vehicle. Only a few people in our city own this exact model. And one of them is Police Car Light. A name surfaced. Powerful name. The man in the footage wasn't just anybody. He was a billionaire entrepreneur, well known for his polished public image and his so-called charity work. He had built an empire preaching about compassion, generosity, and helping those in need. But now, the world saw him for what he really was, a fraud. A monster. Within minutes, the scandal spread like wildfire. Loudspeaker, his name trended worldwide. Loudspeaker protests erupted outside his corporate headquarters. Loudspeaker, major sponsors pulled out from his businesses. Loudspeaker, his smiling face, once a symbol of success, was now plastered across news reports. but for all the wrong reasons. And then, the skeletons in his closet started to surface. Magnifying glass tilted left, former employees came forward, exposing his cruel treatment of staff. Magnifying glass tilted left, ex-business partners revealed how he had bullied his way to the top. Magnifying glass tilted left, old lawsuits, once buried under money and influence, were suddenly being reopened. His social media accounts were flooded with hate. His stocks plummeted. His PR team tried to control the damage, but it was too late. The world had seen his true colors, and karma wasn't done with him yet. The final blow, karma strikes back. The outrage reached law enforcement. Under strict animal cruelty laws, police officers launched an official investigation into the case. Oncoming police car, no amount of money or influence can save him from the consequences of his actions, an officer stated in a press conference. His lawyers scrambled to contain the damage, but the world had already made up its mind. The same man who had built his empire by convincing people he cared about the weak and helpless was now being exposed as someone who abandoned a tiny, defenseless puppy to die in the snow. His empire crumbled. His reputation was destroyed. He had thought the world would forget. He had thought that because he was rich and powerful, he could do whatever he wanted. But one tiny puppy had just ended his reign. The puppy's fate, a new beginning. While the world was tearing the millionaire apart, something beautiful was happening. The puppy, the same one he had so cruelly abandoned, was getting a second chance at life. Animal lovers from all over the world offered to adopt him. Sparkling Heart donations flooded in for his medical care. Sparkling Heart top veterinarians stepped forward to treat him for free. Sparkling Heart, the woman who rescued him, became an overnight hero. And then, the final twist. A letter arrived in the woman's mailbox. It wasn't from just anyone. It was from a prestigious animal rescue foundation. They wanted to feature the puppy's story, to make sure the world never forgot what had happened. They wanted him to become a symbol of resilience, survival, and justice. The millionaire had lost everything. But the puppy? He had gained a family, a future, a life full of love. And that was true justice. As the world raged over the millionaire's actions, the puppy was finally safe, warm, and surrounded by love. The woman who had rescued him decided she couldn't let him go. She had witnessed his struggle, seen his incredible will to survive, and felt an unbreakable bond with him. She named him Hope. For the first time in his short life, Hope felt what it was like to be loved. No longer shivering in the cold, no longer starving, no longer begging for warmth, he had a home. His recovery was slow but miraculous. Sparkling Heart, he gained strength every day. Sparkling Heart, his once weak body became stronger. Sparkling Heart, his eyes, once filled with fear, now sparkled with joy. And then, something unexpected happened. The viral story caught the attention of a famous animal rescue foundation. They reached out to the woman with an incredible offer. Sparkles, they wanted Hope to be their ambassador. He would become the face of animal survival, resilience, and second chances. His story would inspire people to adopt, not abandon. A lesson for the world. Hope's impact. The world had watched a helpless puppy crawl through the snow. The world had also watched as karma took down a heartless millionaire. But more importantly, the world had learned a lesson. Globe showing Europe Africa that no life is too small to matter. Globe showing Europe Africa that kindness will always outweigh cruelty. Globe showing Europe Africa that no amount of money can erase the consequences of inhumanity. Hope's journey from abandonment to love, from pain to healing, became more than just a viral story. It became a movement. Shelters saw an increase in adoptions. Animal abuse hotlines received more calls than ever. Stricter laws for animal cruelty were proposed in multiple cities. All because one little puppy refused to give up. In the end, the millionaire lost everything. But Hope gained the world. And that was the most powerful ending of all. Hope's story is a reminder that cruelty exists, but so does kindness. Every day, countless animals are abandoned, left to suffer alone. But together, we can change that. Dogface stand against animal cruelty. White heavy checkmark adopt. Don't shop, millions of animals are waiting for a second chance. Be the one who gives it to them. White heavy checkmark report abuse. If you see an animal in distress, don't stay silent. Speak up and be their voice. White heavy checkmark support local shelters. Donate, volunteer, or foster. Even the smallest act of kindness can save a life. Speech balloon, do you believe in karma? What do you think about Hope's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's spread awareness and inspire change. Loudspeaker, if the story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and comment heart in a comment box and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories. Together, we can create a world where no animal suffers alone. Red heart paw prints.